Hi everybody, we're now back for step 2 of the HR3 build. So we've got our axle. I've already installed the Z drive, which is 3 grub screws onto the flat of the axle, and 3 button head screws hold on the Del ring gear, which is a 32 dp as standard. We do these in 48 dp if people want them, and we also do them in 64 if you're really brave. So we take the axle, we pop it through the bearings in the pod, make sure it's all running nice and freely. We'll take our dog drive, which is the other side. You can use a Z drive on both sides if you wish, but we prefer the little dog drive on one side. Just helps with the balancing of the pod. There's a little grub screw in there, so just nip that so it holds it in place. What you want to also make sure is the axle has got a little bit of side float, so it's not nipping the bearings when you pop it in. So that's the axle. The motor, we've already installed the lower plate stroke spacer onto the motor. That drops in. Take your M3 button heads, we pop a little washer over the top, through the pod into the spacer plate, and we do the bottom one as well. One thing I didn't say earlier, that if you are using a spacer plate, you have to have a +5 or +10 GRP base plate, because the motor is dropped by 5mm. If you use the standard plastic plate and the lowering plate, then the motor will sit on top of the plate and you won't be able to get the screws in correctly. So if you use the lowering plate, you have to have the GRP plate as well. I know some people have bought the plates, the lowering plate, and then I've had a phone call saying that they can't make it fit. It's because the hole in the plastic isn't big enough to lower the motor down enough. So GRP goes with the lowering plate. So we've now got screws in either side. We can then fit the pinion. It goes onto the motor. Same again. It's a small grub screw which holds it in place. We supply a nice wide pinion with all of our hot rod kits, and then adjustment M3s. Adjust the bottom. You don't need to do these up really tight, just nip them in place and make sure it's all nice and free. I shall be back shortly for step 3, which will be putting the front suspension in place. Okay, right, we're now moving on to step 3, which is the front suspension. We have a bag of bits and pieces for the front suspension. Some of this I've pre-assembled just to save a little bit of time, and just makes it a little bit easier for the video and it doesn't drag on too long. We've got our A-arm front suspension arms. I've popped the kingpins through and put the little circlip on the bottom. These have got 2 little spacers on the bottom and then they're flat at the top, so that is the bottom. I've seen people put them upside down and then wonder why it doesn't go right. So the little bits at the bottom face down onto the chassis. So do that on both. So you've got 2 A-arms with 2 kingpins. Your steering hubs come with ball studs which you can put into place and lock in place with a nylock on the bottom. 2 ball races which go into the wheels. If you've got the option pack, then you get a kingpin brace with all of its parts, and you also get the smaller racing springs. These are slightly smaller and they only work if you have the kingpin brace. So first things first, we take the 2 screws. You have a long pair and a slightly shorter pair. One's about 20 mil long and the other one's about 15 mil long. I can just show you that. The longer one goes in the front hole. So we have the holes here. So the long ones go in the front hole, and the shorter ones go in the back hole. And then if you turn that up the correct way, if you can still see that, in the option kit you also get these nice little 3D printed caster spacers. These sort of double up as a ride height spacer as well. So if you've got a 3.5 and a 1, that's 5 degrees. So you put 1 either side, so they clip in that way and then bring round and locate on the front. We sell these in packs also, so you can have a 1 and a 1 which will lift the wishbone up by 1 mil, which will lower the car and get your ride height to be about 3.5 to 4 mil. So once we've got the 2 spacers on, we take the wishbones, they pop over the top and press down, and we take the other one and do exactly the same. As always, when you do it on camera, it doesn't lock into place. What you can do is just run a M3 drill just up the inside of the plastic, and then they will slide over the screws a lot easier. So that's them in place. On the back 2 screws you put an M3 nut. Don't lock this in place just yet, so just literally put them in place like so. Then you take your hubs. What you can do is put a bit of 6000 damper goo over the kingpin and into the hole. That just helps the kingpin and the hub move up and down and has a little bit of oil damping on them. So they want to move up and down really freely. Do that on both sides, nice and free. Then pop your springs over the top and take your kingpin brace. I've assembled this one. All you do is, it's got 2 little M3 by 6s holding the top in place, and the posts where you have nuts holding the rear in place, these go over the top of the front screws and screw down on top of